Salutations fam, this is Dr. Sawyer from Haltessiagaming, and in today's video, I'm going to be doing a deck profile of the deck I took into my OTS Championship. If you've seen the community tab, you've seen, you already know how it went. But I decided, for this event, because we were playing under the new ban list. Basically, we were playing in the new format for the championship. It put me in a weird situation because I didn't know what deck to play because the meta has kind of shifted. Like Wild Survivors came out. There was like a bunch of new decks, and a lot of the current decks that kind of changed. So I had to spend the last couple of weeks, or rather last like week or so, just kind of hard studying the format to kind of see what I was going to decide to play. I had, a similar idea of, like playing the same deck, but I didn't know if, certain utility options and certain core game plans were going to be good going into the new format. One of the changes that I made for this format was, playing around Droll as much as possible. So one of the changes was that, I wasn't playing the Predaplant stuff, even though it's like, yeah, the Predaplant stuff allows you to build a much bigger board. It allows you to have like a much higher power ceiling. The deck's ceiling is still high enough that it is still able to consistently win. And so like this variant is able to win regardless. For this tournament, I did end up playing, just I threw together a build of like Branded Despia. I had an idea of some stuff to play. I wanted to try out new cards. I was able to get some stuff from like prize support over the last, couple of weeks since Syac came out. So I wanted to, just try it out. I was pretty confident in my decision, and obviously it worked out well for me. So without further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and get right into the deck profile. It's like standard for the. I don't really know what's standard for Branded Despia nowadays because like there's so many different builds, so many different things that people are trying out. But yeah. So to start things off, three Aluber, one Albion, two Albaz, one Cartesia, one Quem, one Dark Magician, and one Maximus. I've talked about Maximus in some previous deck profiles of mine. It's still a very, very good card. There's a lot of neat interactions with this card. So the thing is, this is one of those like special summon cards that like doesn't have to be special summon that way. So like you can tribute summon this sometimes. I have actually done that before, but more importantly, you can summon this off of the effect of Dust Dragon. So if your opponent, if like in the middle of your combo, your opponent like bestials you, you can banish the Dust Dragon, summon Maximus, and then do Maximus plays to like kind of do things like that. If your opponent bestials to like banish like your Albion, so that you don't get the Albion, you can summon Maximus and then put Albion right back in the grave. I was not ever worried about like, oh well, if I'm playing against Branded, because I play the Siphon Lord Omega, you can just shuffle it back. You're not really worried about it. And the reality is that if they're going to send both like two copies of the same fusion, I'm perfectly fine with that because that means they don't have that fusion in their extra deck anymore. Because I don't think I've ever seen a Branded list play like three copies of the same fusion. So if you want to go that far to like resolve it, because the thing is, most of the time people are not going to like play around Cypher or Omega, but if they really want it that bad, by all means, you can burn through your resources, quicker. I'm fine with that. Um, and then we have one copy of Jowgen the Spiritualist. Uh, with the new Sanctifier Dragon, I think this card is like very very powerful. It turns Branded Fusion into like an instant like lock on the opponent. You can just kind of immediately go Branded Fusion, send Albaz in this, make Sanctifier, and then Sanctifier just like brings back the Jowgen, and then they're locked. This turns off it turns off evenly. It turns off Kaiju's, turns off Lava Golem, which are some of the things that this deck does have trouble with. A lot of the time, what I'll do is I'll set this up at the end of the turn after I've like made plays using my other cards, and then just kind of like round it off with this setup. So yeah, I mean, it performed really well. It was really, really strong. I actually didn't use Jowgen that much, surprisingly. But in the times I did use it, it was strong. Like I didn't go for it. Like it wasn't like the go-to thing every time because obviously like Jowgen is reciprocal. But it's just, Sanctifier is obviously a really good card. You have a lot of ways to access it, and this was just a nice way to like close out games a lot of the time. Because one thing about this card is that it's really, really, really tiny. So yeah, there is that. You don't ever want to give your opponent the Jogging because then they can use the Jogging effect and just nuke the board. So you don't want to do that either. Um, and then I was maining 3 Ash and 3 Ghost Spell. I was very much expecting to play against Branded a lot. And just in general, I looked at a lot of the decks in the format. I was trying to have my utility cover as many matchups as possible. I really wanted to avoid having dead cards in my deck if possible. And so ultimately, I decided on like the Ash, the Bells, because even though they're not like super high impact, a lot of time my engine can just play through most stuff. So having like Ash, which is high impact against Branded, this allows me to consistently have an answer to things like Sanctifier. And Bell has that additional utility of being able to stop Bestials from banishing your stuff. Onto the spells, we're playing 3 Branded Fusion, 3 Nadir, 3 Deployment, 3 Opening, the 1 Foolish, Foolish over Gold Sark because sometimes being able to like help set up Dragoon lines, help set up the Jowgen. I just that's a little bit better, or rather, it's more versatile than the Gold Sark. I feel, and because as you saw, I opted not to play the Mercurial, the Spriggans, the Brandon High Spirits. I opted not to play that because there's a couple of cards that I decided not to play because I wanted to reduce the number of dead cards. I basically that's the kind of the idea with the deck was I lowered the ceiling a bit in order to make it so that most of the cards in my deck, like an overwhelming majority of the cards in my deck, were always able to do something. Um, I felt as though the ceiling of the deck was high enough that even though I'm like lowering the ceiling's already high enough that it's still strong enough to win things. Then I'm playing 2 copies of Super Polymerization. It was kind of mid to be honest. Like it was okay. It wasn't bad. It wasn't like amazing. Um, like it wasn't. It was very mid. Um, I probably will end up cutting it for future builds of the deck. But yeah, it was mid. And then we played the 1 copy of Called by the Grave. The card's still insane. Stops hand trap. Stops graveyard disruption. Obviously Called by that one for a reason. Onto the traps, we played the Retribution, the 1 Banishment, and then the last couple of utility cards. I wanted to main deck a Floodgate. I tried to figure out like what I wanted to play that was good against most of the matchups. I didn't want to do Skill Drain because of control decks. I wanted something that was just like good across the board that didn't really hinder me. So I opted to main deck 3 copies of a TC Boo. One thing about TC Boo is that like you can pretty much play under this card almost completely uninhibited. You don't really care about TC Boo that much. Like, yeah, it stops some of your plays, but for the most part, you can completely ignore it. But against Cash, this is like it breaks their board and they can't rebuild it. Flu breaks their board, they can't rebuild it. Eldritch, they can't use their Eldritch engine. Labyrinth, they can't have more than one monster. Like, Dragon Link is basically beats Dragon Link. It beats Sword Soul. It beats Sprite. Like it beats so many decks in the format. Like most of the decks in the format, this completely shuts down. Even going second, you can flip this up and completely break their board, and then they can't rebuild it. So I decided to main deck this, and it was strong. It was very very strong. Um, then the last 2 cards, I decided to main deck 2 evenly. Basically, what happened with the 2 evenly was that after I finished, cutting a lot of cards, because I wanted to reduce the number of dead cards, I had 38 cards, and I opted to take, some stuff from my side deck and put it in the main. And I decided on the 2 evenly because I was like, okay, well, this card has a lot of general utility going into a bunch of matchups. If you draw going first, you just discard it for Lubellion or Dragoon or whatever, so it's not really that big of a deal. But going second, this card is absolutely a blowout. One of my matches towards the end of the event, I was playing against Combo. They built the board. I was thinking, in my head about how to play through the board. And they had like the 3 map Appaloosa, and then they made like Chaos Angel, and I was, that made things a lot more difficult because with Chaos Angel I can't hit over the Appaloosa. They had a background, so I assumed it was the synchro, the counter trap thing. So I was like, okay, I'm not really sure how I can play through the board. I was like, I kind of have to see another way to Branded Fusion so I can play into the counter trap and then have something else. But then I top deck for turn. I drew evenly, and I was like, this simplifies things. And then I evenly I expected the evenly to just like kind of force out the counter trap, but they picked up their back row as if they were about to activate it, and then they picked up the Appaloosa, and I was like, oh my goodness, they don't have the counter trap, and so it basically just blew away the board. They still had the Chaos Angel, but I was able to just get rid of the Chaos Angel with banishment, and then just go for game from there. So yeah, evenly was good. And like I said, if you draw it going first, you just discard it for one of your effects. So yeah, that is it for the main deck. Played 40 cards. Definitely felt pretty happy with it. The only thing that was like felt kind of mid was like the super poly. That is one thing I feel I'll probably change in future builds. It just doesn't really feel that good. Like it's not bad, don't get me wrong, but it just doesn't feel that good. Maybe droplet. I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm gonna end up doing with that card slot. I might just accept that it's mid and just still play it anyway. Onto the extra deck, I'm playing the one copy of Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, one Quiritus, one Albalenitus, one Sanctifier, two Albion, two Albion, one Dust Dragon, one Titaniclad, one Lubellion, one Mirajade, um, an extra Super Poly target, and Mud Dragon of the Swamp because I wanted to cover more matchups. This actually did come up like one time where I like fused into this. Uh, two copies of Garura. One to be able to send off Nadir to draw. It's also nice to have a second one in the grind game against certain like control matchups. And then also obviously it has the utility with Super Poly. One copy of Entis. This is one of the big reasons why I don't really lose to control decks because like Nadir sent Entis is just so strong. And then one copy of Cyframe Lord Omega to be able to one, it's actually really good at recycling your own resources like later into the grind game, but also being able to just because also keep in mind you can send this off of Dust Dragon, so it helps recycle your resources against certain control matchups. You can like get rid of their graveyard resources. It's not once per turn. You can do it multiple times in turn. There have been times where I've gone Dust Dragon, put this in grave, do something with it, and then the Deer put it in grave, do something with it. Maximus put it in grave, do something with it. Um, so yeah, that's going to be the main and extra 15 cards. Um, the one thing about the extra deck that I will say is I wish I could have gotten my hands on a Lulu Lilith. There were so many times where I had Cartesia in like a Maximus in a simplified game state, and I was like, I really wish I could just synchro these two monsters off right now because the Cartesia, right, like will come back at it, like can come back and then just apply more pressure. Lulu Lilith when it goes to grave, it gets you another card, and it just there were several times where I was just like, man, I really wish I had access to this card. Obviously, it's another card that you can summon off of Dust Dragon as well. I probably in the future will, if I can get my hands on it, cut a Garura because the second Garura is nice to have, but it's not necessary. Probably end up cutting it in order to, fit in the Lulu Lilith. Onto the side deck. We already know what the first card is. It is almost always going to be. Actually, I don't think I have. I think that in the like last 4 years, I think there's only been like two lists that didn't play this card. But we have Dino Wrestler Pankratops. I played two copies of Nib, three copies of Droll and Lockbird. I do think Droll is still very important to play in this format. I cited three copies of Crossout Designator. Very, very strong card. Allows you to play through stuff. I watched, I think, a Galzo video where he was talking about like Nadir versus Crossout. And it was mentioned like, okay, if I have Branded Fusion and another card, would you rather it be Crossout or Nadir? We all know it would rather be Crossout. And, the argument was because like my mindset usually is rather than try to stop the interruption from happening, I want to play cards that will allow me to play through the interruption. Because the thing about cards that stop the interruption is that if your opponent doesn't have an interruption, they don't do anything. But with cards that allow you to play through interruption, if they don't have interruption, just build a bigger board and it just solidifies your game state more. But the thing is, you can play both, so I have to play both. I didn't have room for it in the main. I didn't really feel like it was worth playing in the main, because of the wide array of like matchup spreads, and like most of the time people are not gonna like a lot. I didn't really expect to see much Ash because a lot of people are worried about Kashtira and like the combo decks. So I didn't really expect to like worry about Ash game one, but I know game two people are gonna bring in all the like anti-branded stuff, so I wanted to have it in the side at least. Um, Two Cosmic, one Duster, and two Eradicator for like back row. Obviously, Eradicator is strong against a lot more than just back row. I cited this thing going first. You can like set up any of your fusions and then like tribute it, and then call spells or traps and just like blow your opponent out of the water. Against back row decks, this is also really strong because you can get into a simplified game state and then just Eradicator call traps, and it's good. And then the last card on the side is one copy of Dimensional Barrier as a cross out target. Because again, post board, I feel like a lot of people are going to be ready for it, and then might get a token. So yeah, that was the deck. It performed very, very well. I can't complain about it at all. Yeah, so that's going to be it for this one. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment, share it with your friends. If you are subscribed to the Patreon, you will have seen this deck list already, have seen this video already. The link to the Patreon will be in the pinned comment. I post all my deck profiles as soon as as soon as the tournament's over. A lot of times you'll be able to see the deck list as I'm building it. You'll get to see the theory, all the testing that goes into it, all the like discussion that goes into all the deck lists and everything. And yeah, I post all of the videos that I'm not going to be uploading to YouTube for whatever reason, whether there's like editing issues or maybe like a ban list happened and it made like the deck list a little bit iffy, so I had to re-record or whatever. Just so you can see everything beforehand as soon as it's done. That's all going to be available on the Patreon. But yeah, I wanted to give a shout out to my friend, shout out Shadow Takamiki one. So funny thing, Branded was very much the most expected deck. It was the deck that everyone came prepared for, but it doesn't matter if you know what's coming if you can't do anything to stop it. Like they weren't able to stop us. We still performed, and yeah, I was very, very happy about it. Funnily enough, me and Shadow Takamiki one both pulled Starlights out of our prizing. Uh, Shadow Takamiki one pulled the Starlight Vistas, and I pulled the Starlight Firewall. Let me go ahead and let me go grab it real quick. I can show you. All right, get out this binder real quick. Which page is it on? I think it's on this. Nope, went too far. There we go. Yeah, pulled my Starlight. See, pulled the Starlight Firewall, and Shadow Takamiki one pulled the Starlight Vistas. But yeah, there's not really much else to say. There's not really. I don't really feel there's much necessity to like, show a combo video. I guess like I can explain like the Sanctifier thing because like, Sanctifier requires a light spellcaster, and so you just go Branded Fusion, send Jowgen and Albaz, and then summon Sanctifier, and then Sanctifier can just summon the Jowgen. Not really necessitates a combo tutorial. But this has been Darkslayer from Haltessiagaming. Thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful day. Please go drink some water. And now we play the button minigame.